Well, we're here once again with Dr. Tim Atkinson from Virginia, naturopath, works with frequency in healing and particularly in a healing type of ministry. And so, Tim, how did you, tell us again how you got started in this?
Well, I was in the music business, certainly not expecting to go this direction. I had two stepdaughters, had just gone away to college, and they came home to visit. And on their way back to the college, about 100 miles away, they rolled the car, and we had a very bad accident. And so we were called in the middle of the night by the hospital at Joplin, Missouri. They'd been taken there, and they're identical twins. And one was seriously injured, and the other was critically injured. In fact, they didn't expect her to live through the night, and they couldn't tell us who was who because they're identical twins. And so we made the long trek to the hospital, and that began an ordeal that lasted for years. They thought Christy was going to die that night, and so we just started praying and expecting God to do something. And she was still alive when we got there. And then we had several indications that she was going to live. The hospital staff didn't know that, and the doctors tried to convince us she was going to die. And but she was in a coma, and we had to deal with that for several months. And it would be nip and tuck all the way, where we just get right down to practically the last second. And then God would do a miracle, and we could keep going.
So she was in pretty critical condition. You say that, I think you said that she was thrown 65 feet into oncoming traffic.
That was her sister. She did better.
Okay, that was the one that was just in serious condition.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it wasn't too pretty sight either. But Christy's face from about halfway on over was gone. And
wow.
Her brain was gone. And, we learned finally the body's innate ability to heal. It redirected pathways to where she could do things that it was just really impossible for her to do after she came out of the coma. So just another indication of the things God has done for us that can give us that natural ability to heal itself.
Mm-hmm. Did she ever go back to school?
No.
Interesting. Well, so you were telling this story more recently then. Was it last September?
Yes, it was. I was in L.A. at a university where I got my doctorate in theology. And they asked me to be the commencement speaker. So they wanted me to give just a little brief history of, what got me into this, And so I told the story about Christy. And the chancellor of the school called me one night a few weeks ago. And he has a good friend who has a 20-year-old daughter. And she was in a coma at the hospital, and they were trying to talk the family into pulling the plug. And he wanted me to give my story and encourage the man to not do that yet. It wasn't time.
So you spoke at the commencement, when was this?
September.
Just past September, 2018. And then a month or two later, you get a phone call. Somebody else obviously heard your story, and they were in a similar situation, huh?
Right.
Okay.
And so it just so happened my guy from Mexico that does my translating has gone to work at the university. And he's come back home. He lived in L.A., and he spent the last 15 years in Mexico. And it was just time to come home. And he was kind of wondering where he was going to stay and what he's going to do. And the university was kind enough to take him in. And he's translating really for them now, and starting a Spanish, Portuguese, some different languages where they can teach people in their own language. And I said, he knows my protocols. Take him over to the hospital. And so he went over there with the chancellor, and they prayed with her, and he did his thing with our frequency technology, and she has come to, and now she's in rehab. And they were trying to get them to pull the plug on her. Uh-huh. So it's just multiplied. I could tell you 100 different stories of people like that since this happened in 1992.
That's interesting. You you work with the you imprint frequency into small cards, which then you use as to put on energy points.
Yes.
And
sometimes, right, if there's pain, we put it where the pain is, or we put it on an acupuncture point.
But there's thousands of acupuncture points, though.
Well, we just use 11.
Just 11.
I was in China a few years ago. I got invited to go over there and teach them how to do this. And it was just to acupuncturists at a hospital. And so I had them bring everybody that they were having problems with. And we just cleared the problem. Boom, 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 boom. And the head of the doctors was just standing there like this, kind of a grumpy look on his face. Like, you got to prove this. Yeah. And finally, he went and got a guy and brought him back. He says, do him. And I said, what's wrong with him? It's just no feeling in arm. So I said, what do you think it is, doctor? And he said, I think it's heart. So I checked his heart and did a muscle testing deal and that was fine. So I said, not heart. And he goes, Now he didn't give me the grief that people over here do, even though he didn't know about kinesiology, because they check the eyes and, the tongue and all those kind of things. So he knows about different, what we call bizarre methods. And so we ended up, he had a problem with C3 and C4 back here. And that was causing the hands to go numb. And so we treated that. I let him treat it. And it went away. The guy started feeling his hands all of a sudden. And so that really kind of freaked him out a little bit.
Can you tell us very quickly, where are those 11 points that you essentially energize or stimulate?
The 11 points are the inside of the eye, the side of the eye, the entire ear. All of the acupuncture points are in the ear, so we're actually treating the whole body when we're doing that. Back at the top of the head, and I guess with you guys, I could say the start of the bald spot.
Well, the beginning of my forehead.
Yeah, and then the middle.
Yeah.
Underneath, they didn't think that was funny. Under the eye, which is the allergy point, by the way. Under the nose, the chin, collarbone, and inside and outside of the wrists. Some of those points are used with other programs that also work, but I studied acupuncture, and I like 4 of the spots better. And it just seems to go faster. And then we use these little cards. I should have brought one, but I didn't. And these are, we call them energy tags. And we can use these instead of needles. And that way you don't have to be exactly on the spot. You just put it up here and it does its thing.
Get it somewhere near it anyway, huh? There's a transfer of energy from the frequency impregnated card to the point, which then tells the body something what to do, right? Is that it?
It clears the blockage.
Clears blockage, yeah. Okay, which is essentially the function of the needles when you go to an acupuncturist or something.
The difference is this energy travels at 186,000 miles per second.
Hmm.
It goes faster than the energy from the needle.
I see. For the needle, it's only what? The speed of sound?
Who knows?
Okay. All right. So, so I take it that so far the results have been quite positive for. Was it a girl that was in an accident? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, good. That's good. Well, let's go back then to back a few years and sort of develop a different theme. How did you start to get into other areas other than healing, like such as agriculture, for instance, or maybe you can talk also a little bit about the oil drilling, and things of that nature. How did you start to apply these things in a broader context?
We started getting involved with what could be done with this energy, and at first we didn't really know what all it did. So we did a market gap analysis, which is a scientific approach to business, to figure out what the market gaps are, and then we would take the top ones and try to do something with it. So within a week, we had over 100 company possibilities, and we didn't really want to address that many. Didn't have the money or the manpower or anything to do all that. So we wanted to whittle it down to the top 5 or 10 things, which from a money standpoint, the market gap showed that they were each worth at least $10 billion.
If 10 million or billion?
Billion.
Billion. Okay.
Yeah. And so, of course, one of the things was water. Another thing is the environment. Third thing is food or agriculture. And, I said, let's just, pain was the next thing. And I said, let's just stop right there and address those. That'll keep us busy for a few years.
Yeah, I would think so.
So we started with German products that primarily what they were using it for was agriculture. And they were real good at hitting my credit card, real bad at getting us inventory with these frequency products. And so, necessity creates the need for, developing new things. And we figured out how to create the frequencies, and had help from a guy that had been a military contractor for the government. And he was involved in making some of our nice little weapons we got now that nobody knows about. And as a Christian, he found out what he was making. They each get a piece of something. They don't really know what they're doing. And he got together with some of the other people, and they figured out some of the weapons they were making. And he said, I can't go on killing people like this. It's just not a good moral thing, even though we're supposedly the good guys in the white hats. We're finding out now that that's not the truth. But so he sold his company and retired off the grid, and I mean really off the grid. If they had a power outage, he'd be okay. He'd be the only one with the lights still on. And so he worked with me on some of the technology that we have now. And we developed a way to record the frequencies of whatever we want. Even this table right here has a frequency. Mm-hmm. Every animal has a frequency. And it changes, by the way, if we genetically modify it. Mm. And that's what they're doing right now. And that's what I believe was happening in Noah's day. They were genetically modifying people and animals and plants and so on and so forth. And we're back to doing the same old again.
Yeah, as in the days of Noah.
As in the days of Noah. Okay. And so...
Creating Frankenfoods. Huh? Frankenfoods.
Frankenfoods is correct.
Yeah.
So we started really with water and agriculture.
So water purification, cleaning it out.
Cleaned up a lake. And
how'd that happen?
It's kind of a funny story. It was the first thing that we did. It was Lake Tenkiller in eastern Arkansas. Or, I'm sorry, eastern Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, yeah.
And it had been a real clear lake where you could see up to 50 feet underwater. In the last few years, it had gone down to 6 feet.
Because of...
the algae growing from the chicken stuff from Arkansas.
I see. Okay.
And
runoff, basically.
Yeah, there's some governor of Arkansas. I forget what his name was.
That was a long time ago. That was BC, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
or DC during Clinton. And those Arkies were really smart. They dumped it in the Illinois River, which went into Oklahoma and fed all the lakes. It was Oklahoma's problem, not Arkansas's problem.
The Illinois River or the Arkansas River?
Illinois. Did I say Arkansas?
No, you said Illinois.
Yeah. But okay, Illinois River.
That seems long distance from Oklahoma, though.
Well, this is just a few miles from the border.
The Illinois River, really?
Yeah.
I thought it dumped into the Mississippi.
It does.
Excuse us, folks, while we have this major disagreement.
We'll have to look at the map.
Yeah, well
Nobody's
anyway.
got one anymore now that we have GPS.
Whatever it was, they dumped it into the river, huh? Okay.
Yeah, and it really messed up all the lakes in almost said Wisconsin, where I'm from. But we had a group of divers who helped us, and the Corps of Engineers was going to do something about this. They decided to spend $10 million and drain the lake. And there'd be no lake there for several years. And the people did not like that idea. It's kind of like a medical procedure, you know. Don't treat the cause, treat the symptoms. And don't take on the chicken industry. They're too big for you. So they're friends of Clinton. So they decided to do that. And I thought, boy, that's really a stupid idea, you know, but we're going to try this. We don't know if it'll work or not. So we put a proposal together. We were one of 10, and the Corps had agreed with this group that was against draining the lake that they would let them do one of these 10 first, see if anything happened, and they would choose which one it would be. When they chose us, I was shocked and really, thrilled with the idea of the opportunity.
Yeah, so obviously the Corps of Engineers had a lot of confidence in your ability to clean up the lake, huh?
Yeah, we actually found out afterwards that they picked us because they figured of all the 10 different projects, they figured this was the weirdest one, and just no way it was going to do anything.
Not going to work at all, huh?
So we got that out of the spirit of unbelief and kind of fooled them.
Uh-huh.
So we created 10 tubes that we tied off on the diver platform and watched the algae go away over a period of 8 weeks. And it just was an amazing thing. And started seeing fish coming to the area that had not been there for a while. And in fact, it became a top fishing place. And animals that we had not seen for 20 years used to come and drink at that area of the lake. So the Corps, instead of giving us a contract like they promised us, they tried to just hope we'd go away and not do anything about anything. So I decided, since I had my own money in this was a donation thing up to this point, I was just going to kind of casually forget about it and leave the tubes in there. So this was August of 2002 or 3, something like that. And the following March, they discovered that that we had left them in there, and what had happened, the energy from the tubes had gone for miles each way, even upstream, from just that one little area. And we ended up cleaning up the lake to the extent that this had to be voted on by the people. And the people were saying, what algae problem? Because the lake was clear. So they decided they would take it off of the agenda for the vote. And they still haven't done it. And
why were they so adamant in draining the lake when
we
all you got to do is fill it back in, and then all the chicken stuff comes back into the lake, and you got the same problem.
Thing. Yeah.
Just give it another year or two, or 10, or whatever it is.
It'd be clear the 2 years that there's no lake.
Yeah.
So, we thought that was really strange, and then we went to the Cherokee Indian tribe, who actually owns the lake, and they said they don't care about cleaning up the lake. What they care about is a $50 million contract for a marina that, in order to get it, they have to drain the lake so they can make the marina.
Put in the docks and things like that.
And we messed that up.
Oh, dear.
So that's the first time I changed my name to Jose Jimenez.
You can't stand in the way of progress, huh?
I guess.
Okay, yeah, well, that's the money thing.
So instead of getting the Nobel Prize
for cleaning up a lake, very cheaply,
I got the left foot of fellowship, like I was a Baptist that became a Pentecostal or something.
Yeah,
and we were not welcome. And so after that, I gave up on EPA because they wanted $1 million to prove our technology worked. And, they just set the price so high that it's impossible to get a lot of these natural things out there. So the EPA is to the chemical industry what the FDA is to the pharmaceutical. They're the protectors.
Uh-huh.
And we had another little patch that we used, we could put on the fuel lines in cars and increase the gas mileage and practically do away with the emissions.
Uh-huh.
And
does it restructure the gasoline or something?
Does.
Does something in the. That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we found, and we started working on it. But they kind of created the digital technology with the computers that would reset the computer by itself and could overcome the patch. So in order to get it to work on the newer cars, we'd have to take the computer out.
I see.
And then it doesn't pass something,
Uh-huh. Well, if the people's mileage gets too high and you don't sell enough fuel, it's not just the oil companies, but what are you going to do about the fuel tax? See, if you ran the cars on water, for instance, where are we going to get money to build the roads? Because that's all dependent upon the fuel tax. And so, I heard about that long time ago. Problem.
Yeah, in fact, I ran into a farmer that in the 1930s, he was just a kid, and they bought a John Deere tractor that was run by water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was pretty common back in the 30s, so I hear. It was a little before my time.
They got a notice in the mail that it was a factory recall on the tractor, so they sent it in. When they got it back, it didn't have a water tank anymore. And so they asked, what we want the water back. And they go, that was what was wrong with it. We can't do that anymore.
Yeah, that shows obviously the influence of the big oil companies that wanted to sell more of their product, and so get rid of the competition, which is cheap water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I've talked to people since the 70s about such things. I remember back in the 70s when I was in Arizona, we talked to an old man named Hans Miller, who was, by the way, just from southern Minnesota here, but he was in Arizona at the time and retired. He had written a book called America's Ultimate Weapon. It's largely about the monetary system and how he, during the Depression, they used, they had warehouse receipts as a substitute for money. So people could bring their products in, they get a receipt for it, and people could exchange the receipts, and it worked very well as a monetary system until the Treasury Department came in and shut it down because they were counterfeiting. They prefer us having a debt system rather than a tokenized system where it's a token of real wealth that you can trade in for real wealth. Instead, our money is a mortgage. It's a debt. It's a note. It's a note. That's why they call it a note. But he was telling me also about how back in the 30s that his dad, he and his dad had tractors and various farm equipment because they lived on a farm. It was all run on water. That technology is very old. It's amazing we don't, that so few people know about it today. Everybody's dying off, I guess, by this time. We could save a whole ton of money, and the average person would be a whole lot wealthier because the cost of living would be so far lower. But the oil companies wouldn't make as much money, and so obvious choice. Let's go with the fossil fuels. They call them fossil fuels. That's not really. That's really not it.
Does everybody know that?
Yeah.
Fossil fuel doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Earth actually makes the fuel and regenerates it.
There's oil. They drill down 10,000 feet to, and come huge lakes of oil. So what happened? 10,000 feet down, you had a bunch of dinosaurs that all died and they became fossil fuel?
Yeah, tell me how they got down there.
How did they get down there? Yeah. It's all so silly. Anyway, but that's why the Sinclair stations, had, dinosaur was their logo, Dino or Dino, I'm going to call it Sinclair. Yeah. It's all part of the mythology of the oil business. But anyway, let's move on then to the next stage. You got the lake cleaned up, and what else have you done in the progression toward today?
Well, that takes care of the lakes and the streams and a tank of water and so on and so forth. Swimming pools. Mm-hmm. We can go on and on and on with the things that just that can.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great to be able to go swimming in a swimming pool that didn't have chlorine in it?
It's illegal in some countries to put chlorine in water.
Yeah.
They look at us over here like we're really goofy. Like Germany, it's against the law. Mm-hmm. And a lot of technology like ours is used over there for that purpose, where they have a saltwater spa. In fact, somebody reminded me at my last meeting that the German swim team refused to swim in the pools because they had chlorine in the pool.
At the Olympics some years ago, right? Yeah, I thought I heard about that, yeah.
And
so they had to switch over.
They use salt water and other things. Uh-huh. We did private testing and showed that when we put one of the tubes on an Olympic-sized swimming pool, not only does it take the smell away of the chlorine and the toxicity, but it makes them swim faster.
Changes the quality of the water. Makes it. What do they call that?
Got me to thinking, huh?
Viscosity, or what do they call that?
It lowers the surface tension.
It makes it, surface tension, and it makes water slipperier. Yeah.
It's the old
less resistance
routine. So
wish we had that when I was on the old swim team years ago, back in the late dinosaur era.
Yeah. So that pretty much takes care of the water, and of course we have 100 stories for each different product we have. But we went to Mexico after that and started working with Pemex Oil Company.
That's the national.
Yeah, they have just one company down there for the oil industry. And they don't make enough oil. They actually are looking for ways to be able to provide enough for Mexico without having to import. So where there's different policies for different companies, they were actually for working with us to do certain things.
To save the money. Save the money on the oil pumping
because
operations.
they subsidize the oil industry for the people. And so we started, we found out that we could put our technology on their fuel products for heating their homes, bakeries, using, and it would increase the baking time, decrease the oil consumption, save them money. And so they were actually interested in using it instead of trying to block it like we were up here.
Because that would essentially save fuel.
Yeah.
Much like
Which,
saving,
when you got the
getting
government
your
having
mileage.
to pay for it, that's a little different than the other way around.
That's right. It's saving the government money, yeah. But also in reducing the cost of pumping, right?
So we discovered a way to put the frequencies down in the well, and one of the problems that they have is the pipes inside rusting out and the corrosive. So we could take frequencies, the right kind of frequencies, and change their corrosiveness so that they weren't. We could make the acidic quality of the oil so it wasn't so acidic, and it would be able to keep the pipes a lot longer. This was saving Pemex millions of dollars. And we could take a frequency and put it down. Nobody could tell what it was. And we proved that it worked in the labs. And so they gave us a lab to use to prove these different things. And these, what I've been told, it would cost up to $10,000 a day to be able to rent the lab and the technicians and so on and so forth. The first thing that we did was it smelled so bad in there, all the chemicals. Just couldn't really staying in there for all day. So we put a disc on the fan, and they all have fans in there that have that instead of air conditioning. And within minutes, the smell would go away. So that really worked well. We learned that from working with people's basements and stuff like that here, where we could literally take out that smell that the basement had. It's just about everybody's dampness and that kind of stuff. So we ended up getting a contract with Pemex for that, and we had several other things that we were working on. And there's just no telling what we could do. One of the things we were working with on an experimental stage was taking the oil, which was not very good. It was too thick. And we were creating ways to make it so it was like regular fuel. And like the Nigerian crude had a viscosity of 35. And this oil we were working with, they've got this huge oil field that had a viscosity of 5, which is not very good. I mean, you could pick this stuff up, make a ball out of it, and throw it at somebody.
It's more like tar, huh?
It's more like tar. So we got we haven't finished the research on that yet, but
So Nigeria could use this technology.
Well, Nigeria's got the best of the oil, most
So
useful.
they have the best, most useful. Okay.
Yeah.
So they probably need it the least, you say,
Well, from
compared
just
to the
that,
others?
just that one thing, but they have other. They have the same problem with the corrosiveness and that kind of stuff, which we've got that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, take note, Anthony, my friend over there in Nigeria. We correspond quite a bit. You might find that useful sometime. Contact me about it. Okay.